Ambassador Richard Hayes stood by the large window of his quarters on Zelthar Prime, watching the three moons rise over the alien horizon. After 40 years in diplomatic service, he still found alien sunsets beautiful. The red-purple sky of the Zelthari homeworld never failed to impress him, even after his many visits over the last decade. Tomorrow would be a tough day. The border dispute talks were not going well. The Zelthari Empire had controlled this sector of space for thousands of years before humans arrived with their colony ships and mining operations. The Empire did not like new neighbors, especially ones who expanded as quickly as humans did. Richard straightened his formal diplomatic uniform and checked his appearance in the mirror. At 62, his hair had gone completely gray, but his eyes remained sharp and alert. He had to look perfect for tonight's formal dinner with Supreme Chancellor Zorn Kale. "Ambassador, your security team is ready," said Lieutenant Samantha Miller from the doorway. The young officer led his protection detail and took her job very seriously. "Thank you, Lieutenant," Richard replied with a warm smile. "I know these diplomatic dinners bore you, but they're necessary." "I'm not bored, sir, I'm watchful," she corrected him. "Something feels off about this visit. The Zelthari guards have been acting strange." Richard nodded. He had noticed it too. The normally formal and distant Zelthari soldiers seemed tense, almost nervous. In his experience, nervous soldiers were dangerous soldiers. "Keep your eyes open, but remember we're guests here," he said. One wrong move could undo years of piecework. The walk to the Grand Imperial Hall took 15 minutes through the twisting corridors of the Zelthari Palace. The alien architecture featured tall, narrow hallways with gravity that felt slightly wrong to human bodies. The palace had been built 5,000 years ago, long before the Zelthari knew humans existed. Supreme Chancellor Zorn Kale waited at the head of a long table. The Zelthari leader stood nearly 7 feet tall with pale blue skin and 6 fingers on each hand. His ceremonial armor gleamed under the light of floating orbs. "Ambassador Hayes," the Chancellor said, his translator converting the clicks and whistles of his natural language into English. "We welcome Earth's voice to our table." Richard bowed exactly 45 degrees, the proper amount to show respect without suggesting submission. "The people of Earth thank the mighty Empire for its hospitality," he replied with the formal phrase. Dinner was a tense affair. 20 Zelthari officials sat with Richard and his 2 human aides. The humans carefully ate only the dishes pre-approved by their medical team. The food had been tested to ensure it was safe for human consumption. As the meal ended, Chancellor Zorn Kale stood. "Ambassador Hayes, perhaps we might speak privately about tomorrow's negotiations. A word between leaders often accomplishes more than hours of formal talk." Lieutenant Miller stepped forward. "Sir, the security protocol." Richard raised his hand to stop her. "It's all right, Lieutenant. This is how diplomacy works." He turned to the Chancellor. "I would be honored." Miller looked unhappy but stepped back. "I'll wait outside the door, sir." The private meeting room was smaller but no less grand. Ancient star maps covered the walls, showing the vast reach of the Zelthari Empire. Richard noted that several human colony worlds had been marked in red. That was not a good sign. "Ambassador, let us speak plainly," Zorn Kale said once they were alone. "Your people expand too quickly. You establish colonies on worlds the Empire has long planned to develop. Chancellor, space is vast. There is room for both our civilizations to grow." Richard replied calmly. "The worlds we've settled were unclaimed when we arrived." "Unclaimed?" The Chancellor's voice grew cold. "The Empire claims all worlds within its sphere. Your colonies exist only because we have permitted them so far." Richard felt a chill that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. "That goes against our treaty, Chancellor. Earth would view any action against our colonies as an act of war." Zorn Kale moved closer. "Your Earth is young and weak. You have existed as a united planet for barely 2 centuries. The Empire has ruled the stars for 50,000 years. Age does not equal strength, Chancellor," Richard said, maintaining his diplomatic tone despite the growing tension. "Humanity hopes for peace, but we are prepared for other outcomes. Are you threatening the Empire, Ambassador?" Zorn Kale's translator couldn't hide the dangerous edge in his voice. Not at all. I am simply stating facts. History is filled with old empires that believed themselves unbeatable until they met something new. The Chancellor's eyes narrowed. Richard knew he was walking a dangerous line, but he had to make the Empire understand that humans would not be bullied. Perhaps you would like some refreshment, Ambassador? A traditional Zelthari tea. The Chancellor clapped his hands and a servant entered with 2 steaming cups. Richard smiled politely but felt uneasy. Thank you, but I must decline. My medical team has not cleared your tea for human consumption. 1 sip will not harm you, the Chancellor insisted, pushing a cup toward him. It would be a grave insult to refuse this gesture of friendship. Richard recognized the trap. Diplomatic protocol versus personal safety. He thought quickly. In that case, I will honor your custom, he said, lifting the cup. He pretended to take a small sip but didn't allow any liquid to touch his lips. Interesting flavor. Thank you for sharing your tradition. The Chancellor seemed disappointed, but nodded. Their meeting continued for another hour, discussing the border disputes and trade agreements. By the end, Richard felt they had made little progress. The Empire was not willing to recognize human territorial claims. As he walked back to his quarters with Lieutenant Miller, Richard felt a strange tingling in his hands. His vision blurred slightly. Sir, are you all right? Miller asked, noticing his unsteady walk. I'm not sure, he admitted. I feel strange. The Chancellor insisted I try their tea. I pretended to drink it, but I wonder if something transferred through the cup. Miller immediately activated her comm unit. Medical emergency. Ambassador Hayes may have been poisoned. Richard collapsed before the medical team arrived. His last conscious thought was that he had underestimated the Empire's hatred of humanity. If they would kill a diplomat, they would do anything. 3 days later, President Catherine Bell stood before the United Earth Council. Her face was grim as she addressed the representatives of Earth's nations. The Zelthari Empire has returned Ambassador Hayes's body with claims of a natural death. Our medical team has confirmed that he was poisoned with a Zelthari neurotoxin. This was no accident, this was an assassination. The council chamber erupted with angry shouts and calls for justice. President Bell raised her hand for silence. For 50 years, humanity has sought peaceful relations with the galactic community. We extended friendship to the Zelthari Empire, and they responded by murdering our ambassador. She paused, her voice growing stronger. As of this moment, Earth is at war with the Zelthari Empire. May they soon learn what they have awakened. Across Earth and its colonies, military forces began to mobilize. The Empire had killed 1 human. They would soon regret it. Admiral John Cooper stood on the bridge of the EFS Indomitable, watching the stars through the massive viewscreen. At 55 years old, he had spent 30 years in Earth's space fleet. Never had he seen such a massive gathering of human warships. 117 vessels formed up in Earth orbit, from small, fast corvettes to his own massive dreadnought. All ships report ready, Admiral, said Commander Lisa Washington, his second in command. Her dark eyes reflected the seriousness of their mission. The largest fleet humanity has ever assembled, John said quietly, and it still might not be enough. Lisa handed him a data tablet. Latest intelligence on Zelthari defenses, sir. They've reinforced their border outposts. They know we're coming. John studied the information. The Zelthari Empire controlled 300 star systems. Their ships used technology they had refined over thousands of years. Humanity had only been traveling between stars for 50 years. On paper, this war seemed impossible to win. They think their ancient technology makes them unbeatable, John said. That's their first mistake. And their second? Lisa asked. They killed one of us and expected no consequences. John handed back the tablet. Send the order to all ships. We depart in 6 hours. Down on Earth, factories worked around the clock. In just 3 weeks since Ambassador Hayes' death, humanity had shifted to a full war economy. Car factories now built spacecraft parts. Civilian ships were fitted with weapons. Schools trained their students in combat and technical skills. In Chicago, Susan Parker watched the news with her husband Greg. Their son Eric had joined the fleet 2 days after the declaration of war. "Do you think we can win?" Susan asked, watching footage of ships being loaded with supplies. Greg took her hand. "We have to. The Empire won't stop with Hayes. If they think they can kill our people without consequences, they'll never respect our borders. I just want Eric to come home," Susan whispered. "He will," Greg promised, "and he'll come home to a safer galaxy." At the lunar shipyards, Dr. Alan Martinez worked with barely any sleep. His team of 50 scientists had developed a new weapon that might give humanity an edge. They called it the Hayes device. "The final tests are complete," said Laura Evans, his assistant. "The device works exactly as predicted." Alan nodded tiredly. "Upload the plans to Admiral Cooper's ship. Make sure the technical crews understand the installation process." "Will this really penetrate their shields?" Laura asked. "Their shield technology hasn't changed in centuries," Alan explained. "They had no reason to improve it because no one could get through it. But they never faced humans before. We think differently." Laura smiled for the first time in days. "They'll regret killing Hayes." "They already do," Alan said. "They just don't know it yet." On the Zelthari homeworld, Supreme Chancellor Zorn Kale faced the Imperial Council. The 7 oldest and most powerful Zelthari sat in judgment. "These humans prepare for war," said Elder Vex Mora, her ancient voice sharp with disapproval. "All because of one dead diplomat. They are primitive and emotional," Zorn Kale replied. "They will send a few ships to our borders, make angry noises, then retreat when they see our might." War Minister Thalvor looked less certain. "Our intelligence reports show they have mobilized their entire species. Every factory, every ship, every human is preparing for this conflict. Let them come," Zornkel said dismissively. "The Empire has crushed 100 species who thought they could challenge us. These humans have existed for a blink of time. What can they possibly do?" Back on the EFS Indomitable, Admiral Cooper called his ship captains for a final briefing. 20 men and women gathered in the command center, representing Earth's finest military minds. "The Zelthari expect us to attack their border outposts first," John explained, pointing to the holographic map. "That's why they've reinforced them. We won't do what they expect." "What's the plan, Admiral?" asked Captain Greg Martinez of the EFS Defiant. John tapped the controls and the map shifted to show a different sector. "We'll split into 3 battle groups. Alpha Group will create a diversion at their border. Beta Group will slip behind their lines through this nebula. Gamma Group will take the long route through this uncharted region." "Sir, that's dangerously close to the gravity well of a black hole," pointed out Captain Olivia Carter. "Which is why they won't expect us to go that way," John replied. "Each group has specific targets. Communication will be minimal to avoid detection." "And if we encounter civilian ships?" asked Captain William Reyes. "We are not like them," John said firmly. "We don't kill innocents. Any non-military vessel is to be allowed safe passage. We are here for justice, not revenge." As the captains returned to their ships, Commander Washington stayed behind. "You don't seem worried, sir," she observed. John smiled slightly. "The Zelthari have been the dominant species for so long they've forgotten how to adapt. They fight wars according to ancient rules and traditions. We don't." "What's our advantage then?" Lisa asked. "Creativity, adaptability, and most importantly," John looked at the picture of Hayes pinned to the tactical board, "we have something worth fighting for." 6 hours later, the human fleet departed Earth orbit. People across the planet watched as the ships disappeared into hyperspace, carrying humanity's response to an empire that had existed since before humans invented the wheel. On the colonial world of New Montana, 12-year-old Ben Adams watched the fleet departure on his family's view screen. His mother worked as a technician on Dr. Martinez's Hayes device. "Will we win, Dad?" he asked. His father, Carl, put an arm around his shoulders. "The Empire thinks they're superior because they're ancient, but that makes them predictable. Humans are young and we change, adapt. The Empire doesn't understand that killing Hayes wasn't just an attack on one man. It was an attack on all of us. Ben looked at the now empty sky. I wish I could help. You will, Carl assured him. This war will shape our future for generations. Your job is to learn, to grow, to be ready for the world we'll build after victory. The first reports of contact came 3 days later. The Alpha Battle Group had engaged Zelthari forces at the border outpost Vega 9. The diversionary attack was working perfectly. Zelthari reinforcements rushed to defend what they thought was the main human assault. Meanwhile, Beta Group slipped through, the nebula undetected, their ships modified to mask their energy signatures, and far from any mapped routes, Gamma Group navigated the dangerous space near the black hole, preparing to strike at the heart of Zelthari power. Admiral Cooper stood on his bridge, watching the tactical display as reports came in. The first phase was complete. The Zelthari were responding exactly as predicted, sending their forces to meet the obvious threat while leaving themselves vulnerable to the real attack. Send the signal to Beta and Gamma groups, he ordered. Operation Haze begins now. The Zelthari outpost on Vega 9 was considered unbeatable. 3 rings of defense satellites circled the planet. 20,000 elite Zelthari soldiers guarded the surface. 10 heavy cruisers patrolled the space around it. In 1,200 years, no enemy had ever breached its defenses. Vice Admiral Olivia Carter studied the outpost from the bridge of her flagship, the EFS Valiant. As commander of the 3rd Strike Fleet, she led 40 human ships on this mission. They were the Beta Group of Admiral Cooper's plan. All ships report ready, Admiral, said her tactical officer, Lieutenant Peter Valdez. The Haze devices are installed and operational. Olivia nodded. Begin the attack sequence. Remember, we need to hold their attention for 3 hours until Gamma Group reaches their targets. Peter sent the orders. The human fleet split into 3 smaller groups and approached Vega 9 from different angles. On her screen, Olivia watched the Zelthari defense systems activate. Red warning lights indicated enemy weapons powering up. They've detected us, Peter reported. Enemy cruisers moving to intercept. Just as we expected, Olivia said calmly. Deploy fighter squadrons. Have them target the defense satellites. 100 small fighter craft launched from the human ships. Major Daniel Grant led the fighter attack, his voice steady on the communication channel. All wings, form up. Remember? Your training. Their ships are bigger, but we're faster. The Zelthari cruisers fired first. Massive energy beams cut through space. But the human ships performed evasive maneuvers with surprising speed. The Empire's gunners were used to slow, predictable enemies who followed traditional space combat rules. The humans did not. First, layer of satellites targeted, Daniel reported as his fighters weaved through enemy fire. Deploying Haze devices now. Each fighter released a small probe toward the defense satellites. The probes looked harmless, barely the size of a human. And the Zelthari ignored them, focusing their fire on the larger threats. This was their mistake. When the probes touched the Zelthari shields, they did not explode or try to force their way through. Instead, they matched the energy frequency of the shields and slipped through as if the powerful barriers weren't there. Once inside, they attached to the satellites and sent a simple signal. Across the defense ring, 20 satellites suddenly shut down. On the Zelthari command ship, General Kravnar watched in shock as his screen showed gaps appearing in their defenses. Impossible, he shouted. No weapon can penetrate our shields. His weapons officer worked frantically at his station. It's not a weapon, General. These devices somehow matched our shield frequency. They're inside our systems. Destroy those human ships, Kravnar ordered. All cruisers concentrate fire. But the human vessels moved in unpredictable patterns, making it difficult for the Zelthari weapons to lock on. More fighters approached the second ring of defense satellites, deploying more Haze devices. On the EFS Valiant, Admiral Carter watched the battle unfold. They're responding exactly as we predicted. Send in the destroyers. 5 human destroyers broke from the main fleet and accelerated toward the planet. Their mission was not to attack, but to draw enemy fire away from the fighters. The Zelthari cruisers turned to engage this new threat exactly as planned. Second layer of satellites compromised, Peter reported. Fighters moving to the third layer. Any word from Gamma Group? Olivia asked. They should be reaching their targets now, Peter replied. Far from Vega 9, Admiral Cooper's Gamma Group exited hyperspace near the Zelthar Prime system. Their approach through the dangerous route near the black hole had worked. No Zelthari ships guarded this sector because they believed no one would risk such a journey. All ships, deploy stealth measures, Admiral Cooper ordered. Move into position for the Haze bombardment. His fleet silently approached the 5 major shipyards that supplied the Zelthari Empire with warships. Each human vessel released dozens of Haze devices toward the massive structures. Back at Vega 9, the battle intensified. 2 human destroyers had taken heavy damage, but they continued to fight. The fighter squadrons had successfully disabled the third defense ring, creating a clear path to the planet. All fighters return to your carriers, Major Grant ordered. Phase 1 complete. Admiral Carter watched as her fighters returned. Begin Phase 2. Deploy the ground forces. 20 transport ships moved toward the planet, carrying 5,000 human soldiers. The Zelthari had never expected enemies to reach the surface. Their ground defenses were minimal compared to their space forces. Captain Ryan Hill led the first wave of troops into the Zelthari command center. The alien soldiers fought bravely, but were overwhelmed by the unexpected human attack. Control room secured, Ryan reported. We've captured General Kravnar and his senior officers. Admiral Carter allowed herself a small smile. Well done, Captain. Access their communication systems. Send the message. Ryan connected his translator to the Zelthari network. The message was broadcast across all Imperial channels. Vega 9 has fallen to human forces. This is payment for Ambassador Hayes. Throughout Zelthari space, similar messages began appearing. 14 outposts under simultaneous attack. 12 shipyards disabled. Supply lines cut. For the first time in 1,000 years, the Empire was on the defensive. On the Zelthari homeworld, Supreme Chancellor Zornkale was awakened in the middle of the night by frantic aides. What is the meaning of this, he demanded. Chancellor, we are under attack, reported Intelligence Director Melchar. Human forces have breached our defenses in multiple sectors. Vega 9 has fallen. The shipyards at Dornax and Kelthar are disabled. Impossible, Zornkale shouted. How could primitive humans defeat our best defenses? Melchar hesitated. They do not fight according to the proper rules of warfare, Chancellor. They do not announce their attacks or issue challenges. They strike without warning, without following any of the sacred traditions. Send the Imperial fleet to crush them, Zornkale ordered. The fleet has already engaged the human forces at our borders, Melchar explained, but these appear to be decoys. The real attacks came from unexpected directions, using routes we thought impossible to navigate. For the first time in his long life, Zornkale felt fear. How did they develop weapons that can bypass our shields? Our technology is superior, in every way. Council Elder Vex Mora entered the chamber, her ancient face grave. Perhaps we have underestimated these humans. They fight without honor, without following the proper forms of war. They fight as we struck their diplomat, Melchar said quietly, without warning, without honor. On the EFS Indomitable, Admiral Cooper received reports from all battle groups. Operation Haze was proceeding even better than expected. The Zelthari were responding slowly, confused by attacks that broke all their traditional rules of engagement. Send word to Earth, he ordered. Phase 1 successful. Beginning Phase 2. Commander Washington nodded. Do you think they understand, yet, what they've awakened? Admiral Cooper looked at the tactical display showing human ships pushing deeper into Zelthari space. They're beginning to. But by the time they fully understand, it will be too late. Across human colonies, people watched news reports of the victories. In schools, children studied maps of Zelthari space, learning the names of worlds their forces had liberated. In factories, workers cheered each announcement as they built more ships, more weapons. Humanity had been pushed. Now, the Empire would feel the push back. Supreme Chancellor Zorn Kyle had never entered the sacred war chamber in his 200 years of life. No Zelthari leader had needed to use this ancient room for over a millennium. Its walls were lined with battle maps of the entire galaxy. Its central table could display any star system in perfect detail. Today, the room was filled with the Empire's highest military officers. Their blue faces showed emotions rarely seen in Zelthari society: fear, confusion, and anger. "How is this possible?" demanded War Minister Thalvor, pointing at the display showing 14 fallen outposts. "The humans have existed in space for barely 50 years. How have they defeated our best defenses?" Intelligence Director Mileshar looked exhausted. His normally perfect uniform was wrinkled from days without rest. "The humans do not fight as civilized species do," he explained. "They do not follow the proper rules of engagement. They do not announce their attacks or issue formal challenges. They fight without honor," said General Krekthar, the oldest military leader present. "They fight to win," corrected Council Elder Vexmora. The ancient female was the only civilian besides the Chancellor allowed in the war chamber. "And they are winning." Zornkel studied the galactic map with growing horror. Human forces had pushed deep into Imperial territory in just 2 weeks. Supply lines were cut. Communication relays destroyed. The mighty Imperial fleet was scattered, responding to threats that appeared in unexpected places. "What of our allies?" Zornkel asked. "The Draxians, the Mavorian collective?" Mileshar looked down. "They are watching, Chancellor. They offer words of support, but no ships, no soldiers." "Cowards," Thalvor shouted. "Pragmatists," Vexmora corrected again. "They see which way the war turns. They will not support a losing side." A junior officer rushed into the chamber, a serious breach of protocol that showed how desperate things had become. "Chancellor, human ships have been detected approaching the home system." The room fell silent. In all its history, no enemy had ever reached Zelthar Prime. "How many ships?" Zornkel asked quietly. 83, Chancellor, including their largest class of warship." Zornkel turned to his war minister. "Our defenses?" 26 ships remain in the home defense fleet," Thalvor admitted. "The rest were deployed to counter human attacks in other sectors." "Which were diversions," Vexmora said softly. "The humans planned this from the beginning. On the human command ship EFS Retribution, Captain Frank Morales received the transmission from Earth. The message from President Bell was simple: offer terms. "Patch me through to their command center," Frank ordered his communications officer. The massive view screen flickered, then showed the face of Supreme Chancellor Zorn Kyle. The Zelthari leader looked shocked to see a human face calling him directly. "This is Captain Frank Morales of the Earth Fleet ship Retribution. I am authorized to speak on behalf of President Catherine Bell and the people of Earth." "What do you want, human?" Zornkel asked, his translator failing to hide the strain in his voice. "The immediate and unconditional surrender of the Zelthari Empire," Frank stated calmly. Zornkel's eyes widened. "Impossible. The Empire has existed for 50,000 years. We will not surrender to primitives who barely understand space travel." Frank remained calm. "Chancellor, look at your tactical displays. 83 human warships surround your homeworld. Your fleet is scattered. Your defenses are compromised. We have deployed haze devices throughout your system." "We still have 26 ships defending our world," Zornkel countered, "and our planetary defenses remain intact." "The haze devices are already past your shields," Frank explained. "One word from me and your defense grid shuts down. As for your ships..." He nodded to someone off-screen. "Perhaps a demonstration is needed." On Zornkel's display, 5 of his defending ships suddenly went dark, their systems completely shut down by the invisible human technology. "Your ships are disabled, not destroyed," Frank continued. "We could have killed those crews, we chose not to. Unlike you, we do not murder without cause." Zornkel's face showed shock. "What do you want from us?" "Justice for Ambassador Hayes, security for human worlds, and the acknowledgement that humanity is not to be trifled with." Frank's voice hardened slightly. You have 1 hour to decide, Chancellor. Surrender, or we will be forced to continue this war to its conclusion. The transmission ended. In the war chamber, silence hung heavy in the air. Can we fight? Zorn Kale asked his generals. War Minister Thalvor shook his head slowly. Not and win, Chancellor. They have weapons we do not understand. Tactics we cannot predict. How did this happen? Zorn Kale whispered. How did one dead human lead to the fall of an empire? You mistook their desire for peace as weakness, Elder Vexmora said. A common error, but a fatal one. Far from Zelther Prime on the colony world of New Montana, Dr. Alan Martinez watched the news with his team. Reports showed human forces advancing across Zelthari space. The Haze device, named after the murdered ambassador, had proven more effective than anyone imagined. They never updated their shield technology, Laura Evans said, looking at the technical data. They've used the same system for centuries because no one ever beat it. Until now, Alan replied. Their greatest strength became their weakness. They stopped innovating because they thought they were perfect. What happens after they surrender? Asked another scientist. Alan looked thoughtful. We rebuild. We make sure they never threaten us again. But we don't destroy them. That's not who we are. On Earth, Susan Parker received a video message from her son Eric. His face looked tired but proud on the screen. Mom, Dad, we're approaching the Zelthari homeworld. They killed one diplomat, and now their entire empire is falling. They never understood what they were starting. Susan touched the screen. Come home safe, she whispered. In the presidential office, Catherine Bell reviewed the latest battle reports with her advisors. The war had gone better than their most optimistic predictions. The Zelthari are asking for terms, her military advisor reported. Captain Morales has delivered our demands. And if they refuse? Catherine asked. Then we continue until they have no choice, the advisor replied. But our intelligence suggests they will accept. Their other options are limited. Catherine nodded. She looked at the picture of Richard Hayes on her desk. 1 month ago, they thought they could kill our people without consequences. They're learning otherwise. In orbit around Zelther Prime, the human fleet held position. Their weapons remained ready but unfired. Captain Frank Morales waited patiently for the Zelthari response. Message incoming, his communications officer reported. The view screen activated again. Supreme Chancellor Zorn Kale appeared, his ceremonial armor replaced by simpler robes. Captain Morales, the Chancellor said formally. The Imperial Council, have they considered your terms? We are prepared to discuss the conditions of our surrender. Frank nodded. A wise decision, Chancellor. Earth doesn't seek the destruction of your people, only justice and security for ours. As the details were arranged for formal surrender talks, Frank looked out at the blue-green world of Zelthar Prime. An empire that had dominated the stars for 50,000 years, brought to its knees in 1 month by a species they had dismissed as primitives, all because they killed one human diplomat and thought there would be no consequences. 1 month after the fall of Zelthar Prime, the formal surrender ceremony took place in the Grand Imperial Palace. The massive hall had seen 50,000 years of Zelthari glory. Today, it witnessed the Empire's greatest defeat. Acting Chancellor Vex Mora, the only surviving member of the Imperial Council, signed the peace document with a steady hand despite her ancient age. President Catherine Bell signed for Earth, her expression serious but not triumphant. The terms were harsh but not cruel. The Zelthari Empire would give up 30% of its territory, including all worlds near human space. Their military would be reduced to defensive forces only. The Haze device technology would remain in orbit around their key worlds for 50 years as a guarantee of good behavior. Former Chancellor Zorn Kale and the officials responsible for Ambassador Hayes's death would stand trial for war crimes. Most importantly, the Empire acknowledged humanity as an equal power in the galaxy, with all rights and respect due to such a status. When the signing finished, The two leaders stood face to face. "You could have destroyed us completely," Vexmora said quietly. "Your ships controlled our homeworld. Our defenses were useless against your technology. Why show mercy?" President Bell's face remained calm. "Because we're human. We're capable of terrible violence when provoked, but we're equally capable of restraint. That's something your empire never understood about us. We believed peace meant weakness," the acting chancellor admitted. "We have ruled so long we forgot that new species bring new strengths. Remember this lesson," Catherine said. "The next species you underestimate might not be as merciful as humans." As the human delegation prepared to leave, Admiral John Cooper approached President Bell. "The fleet is ready to begin withdrawal, Madam President. Phase 1 ships will return to Earth immediately." Catherine nodded. "And the Haze devices?" "In place around all major Zelthari worlds," John confirmed. "If they violate the treaty, we'll know immediately. Let's hope it doesn't come to that," the president said. "This war cost us too much already." On the journey back to Earth, Catherine visited the memorial area of her ship. One wall displayed pictures of the 241 humans who had died in the month-long war. In the center was a large portrait of Ambassador Richard Hayes, the diplomat whose death had started it all. "Was it worth it, Richard?" she asked the picture quietly. "1 month of war to ensure centuries of peace?" The image gave no answer, but Catherine knew what Hayes would have said. He had devoted his life to building respect between species. The Zelthari had never respected humanity until now. 3 days later, Earth celebrated the returning fleet. Ships filled the skies of every major city. Parades welcomed home the soldiers and sailors who had fought for Earth's safety. In Chicago, Susan Parker hugged her son Eric tightly as he stepped off the transport. "I told you I'd come back," he said, smiling at his parents. Greg Parker shook his son's hand, then pulled him into a hug. "We're proud of you. The whole planet is proud." "I just did my job," Eric said modestly. "The scientists who created the Haze device are the real heroes. Without them, this would have been a much longer, bloodier war." At the Lunar Research Base, Dr. Alan Martinez packed up his office. After weeks of non-stop work developing the Haze device, he was finally going home to his family. "What will you work on next?" Laura Evans asked as she helped him pack. Alan smiled. "Something constructive. The Haze device proved we can manipulate energy fields in ways no one thought possible. Think of the peaceful applications. Better shields for colony worlds, improved medical scanners, more efficient power systems. From a weapon to tools of peace," Laura said with approval. "That's how Hayes would have wanted it," Alan replied. He never believed in violence as the first option. Across the galaxy, other species who had witnessed the short, decisive war sent diplomatic missions to Earth. Species that had previously aligned with the Zelthari Empire now approached humans with cautious respect and offers of trade. The Draxians, lizard-like beings from a system near Earth, were the first to establish a formal embassy. "We have watched with interest," their ambassador told President Bell. "Your species is young but showed wisdom along with strength. You could have destroyed your enemies but chose a measured response. The Draxian Confederacy would be honored to establish closer relations with humanity." Similar messages arrived from a dozen other species. The galaxy was adjusting to the new reality. Humans were now a major power. 2 months after the war ended, a permanent memorial to Ambassador Hayes was unveiled in Earth's Memorial Plaza. The bronze statue showed him with hand extended in greeting, the universal gesture of peaceful contact. President Bell spoke at the dedication ceremony. "Richard Hayes represented the best of humanity, our desire for peace, our respect for other cultures, our willingness to extend friendship across the stars. His death showed the galaxy what humans are capable of when provoked. But his life showed us what we should aspire to be." Lieutenant Samantha Miller, who had been part of Hayes' security team on that fatal day, placed a small Zelthari flower at the base of the statue. The rare blue bloom had been sent by Acting Chancellor Vexmora as a gesture of reconciliation. He would have appreciated that. said a voice beside her. Samantha turned to see Dr. Alan Martinez. I think so too, she agreed. He always said understanding would come, even if it took time. And sometimes conflict, Alan added quietly. He knew the risks, Samantha said. Every diplomat does. He just never expected to become the catalyst for such change. As stars continued their eternal dance across the cosmos, one lesson resonated through the civilizations of the galaxy. Humanity may be young among the stars, but they were not to be underestimated, in war or in peace. On Zelthar Prime, in a small garden outside the now reformed Imperial Council chambers, a tiny monument stood. Written in both Zeltharian English, its inscription read, "In memory of Richard Hayes, whose death taught us respect, and whose life teaches us to seek understanding." It was a small acknowledgement, but an important one. The first step in a new relationship between ancient and young, between tradition and innovation. A reminder that in the vast darkness between stars, actions have consequences, sometimes greater than anyone could imagine.